Oh, what you gonna do, brother? When the Russ Joy Show runs wild on you, brother. All right, I probably offended somebody. Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You figured that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. And no, despite the fact that I just gave you a little Hogan to start the show, there is no NWO shirt today. I thought about wearing it. I had plans to work out at some point today. It hasn't happened yet, but I feel like if I stay in these clothes, eventually the shame will overcome me and I will have to work out on that side of the office. There's workout stuff right over there. I'm not going to spin the camera around, but it is there, I can promise. So no NWO shirt today. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on. The very complicated story and history of Hulk Hogan. We'll get there later on in the show. Some of you will care and some of you will not. Although based on some of the initial comments here, I do feel like there are more people interested in talking about the passing of Hulk Hogan than I might have expected. I don't even know what the hell to do. JH says, in all caps, "It's hot as balls outside, brother. What you gonna do?" So Zacho says, "Oh yes, went down a rabbit hole of Hulk and Macho Man earlier today. What a time 80s wrestling was." The 80s, a time I wasn't even around. So yeah. It's fitting. I told Video Guy Amadeo, make sure you put Hogan on the thumbnail, and without even having to tell him. This is how great Video Guy Amadeo is at this point. This is how aligned he and I are at this point. It's actually getting a little bit scary. He used Hollywood Hogan. He used the NWO Hollywood Hogan on the thumbnail. Good stuff out of him. We're going to get to that a little bit later on. Now, there are a few things that I want to get to on today's show. I plan on today's show being short because, for those of you who missed it, right, we did a show on Monday, we did a show on Wednesday. Those are normal. We ended up doing a 2-hour show on Thursday. That was not the intention. We did a show as the news was breaking that the 5 players in the Hockey Canada trial were going to get acquitted, and we stayed on here for, it legitimately was 2 hours of a show, actually a little bit over 2 hours, until the verdict was officially read that all 5 players were acquitted. And then I watched from a distance over the next few hours as the NHL released a statement. We did Snow the Goalie. We dove into it there with Ant and Bundy. And it was just by the time yesterday ended, I was all talked out of the Hockey Canada stuff. There are a couple of probably noteworthy things to discuss there real quick at some point today. We had JJ Watt ether a person on Twitter about the idea of tracking training camp stats, so I do want to get to that as well. And there is a possibility here that the Eagles are going to try to have a dome. Now, if you've been paying attention to this show for months, which many of you have been, you'll remember that I've been talking about the idea of the Eagles getting a dome for quite a while, and the biggest reason behind it simply is they want to be able, they meaning Jeffrey Lurie and Eagles ownership, they want to be able to host massive events that happen year-round, make it a little bit less reliant on the weather conditions, a little bit less reliant on football season. They want to be able to fill out whatever football stadium they have with concerts, potentially with the Final Four, maybe a Super Bowl. And if you're a team in the Northeast, the only way for you to be able to host any of those things is with a dome. So I do want to get there. Before we do, I'm going to drop the comments right over here. Boom! Bottom right side of the screen. You can let your thoughts fly over in the chat. I brought this up on Wednesday's show. We've now added and opened up the community tab over on the Russ Joy Show YouTube channel. So in between episodes, if you have thoughts, you should be able to post in the community tab. If there's feedback to episodes, you should be able to drop it there. Those of you who get to participate live in the chat, many of these names are becoming pretty synonymous with the show at this point. You got your Chris Freeds and your Video Guy Amadeos and JH and Zacho and Andrew Fawcett. You get Ford in here, just a few, and I see those names right now, and there are many others who come up almost every episode. All of those people are used to kind of bantering with each other when the show goes live, but for some of you, you don't get to participate in that live chat because the time of the show doesn't work out or whatever. But in the community tab, you can actually interact with those people. And so you don't have to just sit in the background and say, all right, I disagree with this person's take on the screen. You can have that conversation over in the community tab. Also floated out the idea on, I think, Wednesday, about channel memberships. I'm still kind of messing with the idea, trying to figure something out that's additive, additional kinds of shows. Maybe things like a bonus show that we did yesterday ends up going behind a members-only kind of playlist on the channel. I don't know. Just a thought. We'll see. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I honestly don't know. Just trying to find more ways to add value to each and every one of you who, get to hop on by every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then sometimes for emergency episodes. So I'll keep you posted. Okay, now, I want to get into what I think is the biggest story. Actually, no. Let me go with an update really quick. And if you want my unfiltered thoughts on the Carter Hart acquittal, on all of the Hockey Canada stuff, I would highly encourage you to go back and check out Thursday's 2-hour edition of the Russ Joy Show. I'd encourage you to go check out yesterday's Snow the Goalie, and by all means, you can find out in real time how I was feeling about things as they were unfolding. But there is one little update that we did not get to on this show yesterday. We touched on it over on Snow the Goalie, but for those of you who, for whatever reason, watch this but don't watch that, I do kind of want to give you a little bit of a sample of how the NHL is currently approaching things with these players that have been acquitted, because it's very interesting to see how Gary Bettman has kind of gone out of his way to, I think, step in a steaming pile of doo-doo. I will remind everyone that regardless of how you feel about the Hockey Canada trial, regardless of how you feel about those 5 players, regardless of what you think of their testimony, regardless of what you think of the accuser, all of that, if justice was served, if it wasn't, set all of that aside. I know it's hard for a lot of people, but just try for a second, set it all aside. The acquittal of these players doesn't necessarily, there's a difference, right? Nuance here between not guilty and acquittal and totally innocent. There is some gray area. But an acquittal, to me, should have meant that those 5 players would then be eligible to play in the National Hockey League. And I want to reiterate a point that I made on this show and on Snow the Goalie yesterday. So follow me on this. And again, you have to try in some way, shape, or form to remove all of your feelings about the trial. And I want to just focus in on one little hockey element to this for a second, if I may be so bold. The Philadelphia Flyers, without a question, should probably have a conversation with Gary Bettman, because prior to Carter Hart's trial, prior to the trial of these 5 Hockey Canada players, Carter Hart was set to become a restricted free agent at the end of the 2023-24 season. At that point, the Flyers did not issue a qualifying offer. Now, one of two things could have happened. The Flyers could have decided, we don't want to give a qualifying offer to this guy. We don't know if he'll ever be back. We don't know when he's going to be eligible. Why are we going to have him on the cap? Why are we going to pay this money? There's another possibility, which is that the NHL said to the Flyers, do not extend him a qualifying offer, because we're going to have a lot of questions about how this case plays out. The NHL claimed that they were doing their own investigation that they were going to release. And so the Flyers ultimately didn't issue a qualifying offer. Now, all of this comes with the caveat that if the National Hockey League either gave explicit instructions or implied to the Flyers that there would be consequences for extending a qualifying offer to Carter Hart, based on this acquittal, to me, the Flyers should be able to go back to the NHL now and say, listen, we could have retained the rights to this player. You did not allow us to. We should be granted those rights. We should be granted that exclusive negotiating window. And from that point, the Flyers should then, as a collective, say, well, we either want to negotiate with this player and his agent and sign him to a contract, or we do not want this player, but we are going to be open to trading his exclusive negotiating rights like you would be able to for a restricted free agent. And based on the fact that there are probably anywhere from 3 to 5 teams interested, throughout the name Edmonton, throughout Carolina, maybe Seattle, could have Columbus. There are teams that could use some goaltending help. Maybe some smaller market teams. Could you see him go to a Vegas where there are just a lot of people and maybe you can fly a little bit under the radar? Maybe. I just don't think, I think outside of Edmonton, you can rule out most of the Canadian teams. If I were the Flyers, that's what I would do. Why should the Philadelphia Flyers organization be penalized for something they were not complicit in, for something that they did not themselves have anything to do with? That would be my point from the Flyers' perspective. Now, ultimately, if the Flyers simply said, we are not going to extend a qualifying offer, I don't think they have a leg to stand on. But if the league instructed them, you cannot extend this qualifying offer, you should not, they should get that a little bit of a bargaining chip back. Because remember, like before all of this went down, there were teams inquiring about Carter Hart and his availability and whether or not they could trade for him. We had said over on Snow the Goalie for a year and a half that like there were teams that were approaching the Flyers. Listen, I think a good number of people in the hockey world kind of knew that this trial could happen at some point. There had been a prior investigation. The police had looked into it. So maybe teams kind of gave the Flyers an idea like, hey, if there's nothing to come of this, like this is what our offer would be, but we're not going to make this trade until we know what's going on. The Flyers, in theory, could have gotten some kind of assets back. It appears as of right now that they stand to get nothing. And this isn't being a homer. This isn't trying to pitch, equity here, or pitch, some kind of fair and balanced take for the Flyers. I'm just saying, if I were the Philadelphia Flyers and I were told you cannot do anything to retain the rights of this player, and now you stand to lose him for nothing, I go, should probably fight that. Now, that is my one little hockey take on it. But I do want to take you to a statement that was issued by the NHL yesterday. And again, regardless of how you feel about the trial and about the outcome and all that, just set that aside for a second as best you can. Based on an acquittal, I am still of the opinion that if that is where things currently stand, and it is, if the players have been acquitted, I don't know how you could have to do an appeal process. I mentioned the Mitchell Miller thing where there were these horrible accusations about abusive language to a teammate. And ultimately, the Bruins tried to sign him, and then the league said, well, he has to apply to even be eligible to play in the league, and then that all kind of fell through. I don't know how you can make these guys have to appeal to get back in the league, but here's the statement from the NHL following the verdict, the acquittal of 5 players. Quote, "The allegations made in this case, even if not determined to have been criminal, were very disturbing, and the behavior at issue was unacceptable. We will be reviewing and considering the judge's findings. While we conduct that analysis and determine next steps, the players charged in this case are ineligible to play in the league." I get that Bettman has a legal background. I think that they are opening themselves up to more litigation. Now, why should I care? Why should any of you care? I'm not sure that you should. But I think that that kind of statement and trying to set that kind of precedent maybe causes a few extra headaches for the league. I don't know how you kind of overrule what the court found. Now, we talked about this on Snow the Goalie yesterday. In theory, double jeopardy does not pertain to this case. The Crown could theoretically appeal the results if they think a ruling had been made that there was a legal proceeding that wasn't followed correctly. You could maybe go back to the mistrial, the dismissal of the second jury. Maybe there's something along the way, the unwillingness to admit certain evidence into the case. Will the Crown try to do this again? Will they try to put this accuser on the stand again? Like, I really don't imagine they will. But is that what the league is trying to do? They trying to buy time until there's an appeal process? I don't know. Maybe. But I think it's pretty wild. I think the league is opening themselves up to litigation because ultimately what can happen here is like, if there are teams interested in Carter Hart, maybe not the other 4, but certainly in Hart, and he effectively loses out on wages that he could earn from now until December or whenever the league decides they can appeal to get back in, I think they're opening themselves up for litigation. Now, maybe they're not. Maybe they feel like this is in the best interest. Maybe there's a morality clause that these players sign when they sign their first contract with the league, and the league can then argue that, you know what, based on the accusations in this trial, you violated the morality clause. Like, maybe that's possible. It could be that. Maybe that's the simplest explanation, but it's a weird situation to be in. Jay Grebby here says, I believe it was for conduct detrimental to the league. Maybe. It could be. But it's I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be tough to impose that. I think ultimately you're going to see these players make the appeal, try to get back into the league, and ultimately I think Hart will play. I don't know about the other guys. Considering that they were kind of like bottom tier talent anyway, I don't really foresee a team wanting the headache. Hart, I think, is maybe the one exception to the rule. So that is the follow-up from yesterday's episode as it pertains to the Hockey Canada trial. Again, you can always go back and check out that full episode. It's on YouTube. You can find it in your favorite podcast app. But for now, I'm effectively done with the Hockey Canada trial, unless there is something that I fundamentally have missed here. I'm going to just check the comment section really quickly. Zacho over on YouTube says, you don't want to do another 2-hour show? I don't know. JH says, that was a wild comment section. Hopefully today is better. I was trying to figure this out, too, because there were a ton of comments. And I was like, oh, there has to be a way. Like YouTube has to have a way to like monitor how many comments there were on a specific episode, because like there were a lot of comments. And I kind of expected it to be a little bit crazy, and it got maybe a little bit crazier than I had honestly expected. But like I don't even see a counter, because I was trying to find it last night. I was like, all right, how many did we have? And like it was a never-ending rolling list of comments. It was honestly pretty crazy. But let's see. Let's see. I saw something about a writer, but I didn't see a column from that writer, so I don't want to put that up on the screen yet. Let's see. There's some hockey stuff here. JH says, it's easy, Russ. Nobody's entitled to any specific job. I mean, I guess that's fair. But we'll see. And then Zacho says, isn't that the point of unions, job rights, hypothetically speaking? It could be. So we'll find out what ultimately happens over there. So I want to move on to something that's a little bit happier, if that's okay. I want to move on to something that could really affect your football experience if you are a Philadelphia Eagles fan, because while it's not going to happen this year or next year, I've been saying now for a while that in the midst of this whole sports complex renovation, this reimagining of the sports complex, that I fully believe the Philadelphia Eagles are going to build a dome. And I know that on the surface, a lot of people say, well, that's a really stupid thing. Like, part of home field advantage is, you play in these elements. And then all the dome teams who have to come to Philadelphia, especially in the postseason, aren't used to playing in the cold or aren't used to playing in the snow. And that is an added advantage for your team. And fair enough, fair point. When you have a warm weather team that comes up to Philadelphia and has to play in 7 inches of snow and there's like freezing rain and everything, yeah, you might not be used to it. And it might actually be an advantage for your team. But I've been saying that this is so much more of a business decision than a football decision. And if you remember, back when the idea was out there that the Sixers were going to go build at Market East, that was like their whole thing, and the Flyers were going to build their own new arena, and there was the idea of a WNBA team, and the esports arena that was scrapped might end up becoming a small concert venue. And then you had the idea of like apartments and stores were going to be built, and they were going to try to create like a mini town in the sports complex. And you knew that Citizens Bank Park, Phillies are happy there. Everything's going well. They continue to just keep that place lovely and nice. Love Citizens Bank Park. I've said all along, I think that the Eagles are ultimately going to want a dome. And the answer and the reason for it is very simple. If you're the Philadelphia Eagles, that stadium, I hate Lincoln Financial Field. I do. I do not like that stadium whatsoever. It is my least favorite of the Philadelphia stadiums and arenas. It is one of my least favorite NFL stadiums I've been in. One that comes to mind that I hate significantly more is MetLife. But I don't like Lincoln Financial Field. I don't understand it. I don't feel like the sound multiplies the way that it should. Maybe it's the open ends. I've just never really loved it. It feels kind of spiritless. Like when you go into Citizens Bank Park, how it feels like you're getting a warm hug? Maybe it's because it's the summer. But like you feel like you're getting kind of hugged by nostalgia. And there's like hope springs eternal when you go to a Phillies game, even if the bullpen's going to come in and like blow up. Or Max Kepler is going to get one of the last at-bats and, puke all over himself. Something about Citizens Bank Park that makes you feel this is great. And every seat in the place, you're like, this still ends up being a good seat. Even if you're sitting up in the 400 level, you go, I can still see things. Like, this is good. You go to Wells Fargo Center now, like since the renovations, and you go, yeah, this is actually pretty nice. I didn't like Wells Fargo Center before the renovation, right? It just kind of felt like it was an outdated arena. I think it's significantly better now. You go to Subaru Park. There's not a bad seat in the house at Subaru Park if you go to see a Union game. But I hate Lincoln Financial Field. Like, the sooner they tear it down and rebuild with something new, the better. They can't host a Final Four. They can't host any indoor events that would otherwise move significant ticket sales. They had a WrestleMania here, not this past spring, but last spring. And I went to WrestleMania. I went to night 1, and it was unbearably cold. And one of the things that the WWE kind of said coming out of it was Philadelphia was a great place to host a WrestleMania. The facilities were fantastic. Having access to, like, right across the street, you have Wells Fargo Center. They could run the NXT show leading up to WrestleMania. Like, that's great. They could set up the Fanatics Fest and what was it, WWE World. Like, having all of that space, all of that parking is sensational. Like, that is something you don't find in a lot of cities. The downside was it was unbelievably cold. So if your idea is, we want to be able to host events like that, we want to be able to host events like WrestleMania again, well, they're kind of calendar limited. You're locked into those dates. And I don't see a scenario where WWE says, yeah, we're going to turn back around and go back to Philadelphia for WrestleMania knowing how cold it was. Could you, like, try to make the case, oh, well, SummerSlam makes sense. They're doing 2 nights of SummerSlam this year. Could the Eagles and Lincoln Financial Field host a summer pay-per-view? Sure, but then again, you have the weather. You have the weather elements that you don't want to have to account for. The Final Four to me is like a big one. Certain concerts, certain artists who might not want to have to deal with potential weather, that's another part of it. How about winter concerts? Totally out of the realm of possibility for the most part, right? It makes all the sense in the world that Jeffrey Lurie would want to have his massive stadium, the biggest one in the city, be one that could be used year-round. And so I fully expect them to go to the Dome. Now, they have sent out emails to season ticket holders requesting feedback about the idea of potentially a Dome. But before we get there, I want to go back to a clip that Elliott Shore-Parks put out on Twitter back around the Super Bowl, this past Super Bowl, when he was asked about a dome or about trying to put a roof or something over Lincoln Financial Field. And I want you to hear what Jeffrey Lurie has to say, and then I want you to try to tell me that it doesn't sound like this guy's mind is already made up, that he wants to have a dome, to have a place that they can host events year-round. Let's go out to Jeffrey Lurie back around the Super Bowl.
I don't have a strong opinion about it because you're torn. I love outdoor football. I love it. I love the cold games. I like the hot games. I like the snow games. On the other hand, does Philadelphia deserve to host the Super Bowl, NCAA Final Four? Lots of great events. It's an incredible sports city. Does it deserve that? Yes. So you got to balance all those things.
So there's your split, right? Like, from the football owner side of things, you want that home field advantage. You want the seasons. You want snow games. You want the advantages that having an outdoor stadium comes with, especially if your team is really good. But the flip side is, like, the man wants to make money, and who could blame him? And there's another event there that he mentioned that I intentionally omitted to this point. They want to host a Super Bowl. You're not hosting a Super Bowl in February in Philadelphia. It's not happening. So add these things up. Final Four, Super Bowl, non-fully sports events, with all due respect to pro wrestling. You can't host a WrestleMania. Say AEW comes to you and says, we want to host All In Philadelphia or a massive stadium event. Can't do it. To me, it's a no-brainer. And I know that a lot of people who are very dead set in this idea of home field advantage will freak out and say it's nonsense and it's a terrible idea and it's ruining football and it kills your home field advantage. But in fairness, I don't think that you're going to see a lot of open-air stadiums in cold weather cities a decade or two from now. I think you're going to see more and more teams move to having domes. Now, if you want to still have grass or a grass composite that's kind of feathered in with turf, that's a different conversation. But I just don't see a scenario where you're going to see the New Yorks and even New England, like maybe at some point New England builds a dome. You saw Minnesota move indoors. I just think that you're going to get to a point where a lot of the cold weather cities are going to have the same realization. We are limiting our upward potential from a financial perspective of having year-round events. I could be wrong. I could be right. Now, if it's a retractable roof, maybe it's the best of both worlds. If Jeffrey Lurie says, you know what? It's going to snow. We're going to open the roof. I mean, I don't know what that means. In fairness, like, I'd have to imagine it's not a great idea to have a retractable roof and say, yeah, let's let a foot of snow land inside of the building. However, maybe you can have the best of both worlds. Maybe you can allow for the cold. And your fans show up and they know, all right, they're not closing the roof. We're not going to have, 75 degrees inside the dome for a January football game for the NFC Championship game. We still have to bundle up because it's going to be cold. Okay. I mean, are Eagles fans really going to complain? Are you going to get like the first world problems people kind of like knocking down the doors for the NFC Championship game saying,
it's 30 degrees outside, and you expect me to have to wear a coat inside of a stadium that has a retractable roof?
yeah, put on a coat. You'll survive. And if not, go to the bathrooms where they might even have heated seats on the toilets. Okay? Like, I don't view it as a controversial topic. I think the Eagles should absolutely build a dome. To me, it's not even close. I think anything else or anyone who tries to tell you differently is being somewhat disingenuous. I just, I don't know exactly, what else you'd expect. And, somebody threw out this, no, I'll avoid this image. But there was one about, what a potential dome could look like, what it would look like from the inside for the Eagles. I just don't know. Now, I bring all this up because, as I said earlier, they've been sending emails out to their season ticket holders to try to solicit some thoughts and some opinions on, what it could include. So, here's the survey. I'll show you the email really quick, and then we're going to move on. So this was the first part. Dear Eagles fan, thank you for your incredible support this season. Your unwavering support inspires us every day. As we look to the future, we are committed. Go away. There we go. We are committed. Where'd it go? There we go. To delivering a best-in-class game day experience for Philadelphia Eagles fans. To help guide this vision, we're exploring potential updates to Lincoln Financial Field, including both renovation options and the possibility of a brand new stadium in the region. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, so then here's what it includes. They talk about a renovated link, having improved parking and pedestrian access, enhanced tailgating, pre-post-game entertainment options, upgraded concourses and stadium technology, and a variety of new premium seating options. Then, this is where it gets interesting. Please rank the designs in order by preference. 1 is the design you prefer, and 5 is the design you least prefer. Open air covered, canopy, fixed, natural light, and then you have this guy, right? So you have this canopy, you have the fixed natural light, you have the open air. This one on the bottom just flat out looks like a dome. But these are your 5 options. The fact that they're including this idea of a canopy, about having a soft roof on it, right? With the canopy, with the natural light, and then having a flat out dome, a nice hard roof. Maybe it's a retractable roof. That to me is interesting. So I need to know from people in the comments, do you support the idea of a dome? In fact, I need to know that so badly that I'm going to add it to a poll right now. Question is simple. Should the Eagles build a dome? The answers are either going to be yes or no. I want to know what you think. I don't actually care about the nuance of, is it a soft roof? Is it a retractable roof? Is it an immovable roof? But you can let me know over in the comments section. The poll is now there over on the Russ Joy Show YouTube channel. Get your votes in. Should the Eagles build a dome? Intrigued to know what you think. Again, I think that it absolutely should happen. Joe Fisher over here on YouTube says, Russ, the one report says the sports complex area the teams want in sports districts. So rumors of teams moving to new stadiums or arenas after Flyers Sixers. Yeah, I've been saying for a while that I still think the Navy Yard is in play, but there are some logistics they have to figure out. That's where I think you could maybe build a smaller concert venue, unless they're going to move the Flyers Sixers combined arena down that way. I think the real question here is what's going to happen to Wells Fargo Center. And where is the new arena going to be built? You're not going to tear down Wells Fargo Center to build a new stadium. You can't do that quickly enough. So once you figure out where that new basketball and hockey arena are going to go, then yeah, maybe you implode Wells Fargo Center. Maybe that becomes where you build the new football stadium across the street from the Link. Maybe the Link then gets torn down. And maybe the Phillies at that point want a new baseball stadium. Or maybe that's where you build that other concert venue. I don't know. Again, they're talking about this mini city in the city where they're talking about having apartments and restaurants and stores. And the idea there is to kind of build a mini town that keeps you in the sports complex, that before a game happens, you park and you go eat and you go shopping and then, you stop at your car, drop your stuff off, go into a game. Or traffic sucks getting out of the games, instead of being limited to just Xfinity Live, you can go down and go get something to eat, have some drinks, sit around, wait, do whatever. Maybe rent an apartment, maybe rent a hotel room or whatever, and still be down in that sports complex. I think that once the Flyers and Sixers get their arena built, I think that's when things really start moving on the link. Can they add a retractable roof to the link? I don't think they can. What the hell would that look like? Are they going to try to round out the ends and then add a roof over top? I don't know how that would work. I can just say build a new stadium. Ford says, who says rent a hotel? I thought I said rent a hotel room. Nah, just rent the whole hotel. Do better. Make more money. Rent an entire hotel for yourself. Chris Freed says, why would Comcast give up the second arena? The spectrum was kept until CapEx was needed to keep it over, and Comcast spent how much recently on arena renovations? The one issue that you potentially run into if you keep the second arena, notably like Wells Fargo Center, the Xfinity Mobile Arena, is if you build this new arena, what are you going to fill the other one with? Remember, there were all those conversations about when the Sixers were going to build at Market East, it was, all right, now you're kind of cannibalizing the potential concerts. You're cannibalizing the same potential indoor concerts and events. So if you have 82 combined games between the Sixers and the Flyers at a new arena, say it's 82, sometimes they play on the same day, but let's say, all right, 82 nights out of 365. Okay? You're going to add the Wings in. Are you going to add the WNBA team that's coming to Philadelphia to that same arena? Because then it feels like you're doing a lot. Having all sports in that arena, is that how that's going to work? Are they going to have the WNBA team and the Wings play at Xfinity Mobile Arena? I don't know. There are a lot of logistics that I just have questions about, and I can't imagine having two fully sized arenas in the same sports complex benefiting the greater collective in that sports complex. I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't know if I believe in it. JH says PWHL, WNBA, lacrosse, all sorts of things that can go in the old arena. I mean, I'll throw the idea out there, right? I've said this a bunch of times. You could figure out a way to retrofit Xfinity Mobile Arena and get the Philadelphia Union to move and have the Union play in an indoor arena. There's a way to do it. I don't think they will. They've now invested in a gigantic sports complex down on the Chester waterfront. I can't imagine that you're going to throw all that money into building up the academy and then abandoning Subaru Park. That doesn't make a ton of sense. Unless you're getting a huge financial incentive to do it. And then Union 2 play their games at Subaru Park. But then again, they're going to turn Subaru Park just into a concert venue that also has all of these soccer buildings. I can't envision that happening. It's interesting. Now, by the way, there has been this conversation about all right, well, the Eagles own a bunch of land near NovaCare. Could they try to build the new stadium where NovaCare is? I guess in theory they maybe could, depending on zoning. But then you run into the issue of there aren't, that kind of defeats the purpose of having the sports complex all in that one little area. I know NovaCare is not that far, but I can't imagine you're going to do that. So I don't know. I don't know. JH says the waterfront area is beautiful as long as you're inside the arena. I think that's true. Greg Bondarenko over on YouTube says, I miss the Spectrum being the minor league stadium for Phantoms. The Kicks. Oh, remember the Kicks? Poonugs39 says, I would hate it if Philly breaks up the sports complex. Ammo23 says it's too close to residential. I think you're probably right. So then it becomes what do you use that land for? Does that become a place that you start building a new training facility for some of the other teams? I'm not exactly sure. All right, let's see. I know that there were a few other things going on in the comments earlier about this, and I wanted to touch on it quick. If there was something, we got past the initial conversation there. Jay Grebby with a good afternoon to Russell and the Russettes. Thank you for being here, Jay. And says, thank you for being the distraction for my MBA paper. Oh, Jay, we have to know. Where are you getting your MBA? And what is the thesis of your MBA? We need to know. I think it's pretty important. And then we're all going to cheer for you. And when you get the MBA, then we're all going to have a little celebration for Jay Grebby on the show. Let's see. We're going past the initial thing here. Ford says, YouTube chat needs a lot of work. You should be able to like a comment, for example. I don't control that, but I do like it. You can like a comment in the regular comment section, but not in the live comments, which is kind of weird if you think about it. Let's see. Lawrence Fine over on YouTube expresses some love for the snow games, and I agree. Zacho says, are retractable domes a thing? Yeah, Rogers Center has one. They have a retractable roof, which is pretty cool. I got to go watch a Blue Jays Diamondbacks game when I was up in Toronto for work, and it was a really cool thing. Let's. Dave P says retractable roofs are a thing. Yes, but then I'm trying to figure out this. There's like something here about a drone or something. Jim Grosso says we have become a nation of wusses. Wasn't that Ed Rendell? Oh boy. Jamie Calvario. I've said that name a bunch of times, and here we are, stumbling on it. Says the NFL is keeping up with the Joneses League for owners. Probably. I mentioned about the heated seats in the bathrooms. Says heated toilet seats with bidets. That would be something. God help us if that happens. Andrew Fawcett says, can we each get a Madonna private toilet? If you don't get the reference there, Madonna did a concert at Wells Fargo Center, now Xfinity Mobile Arena, like a few days, I think, before the Flyers Charities Carnival. And they had to like replace the carpet in her dressing room, right? And which was like a locker room or whatever. They had to replace the carpet, and they had to like install a brand new toilet for Madonna. Like that was a thing as part of like her rider or whatever for doing a concert in the arena, which is pretty crazy. Let's see. Let me skip ahead here a little bit. Greg Bondarenko went to go see Fantastic Four. Let us know how that was. I didn't see Fantastic Four. I didn't see Superman. I don't know what we're doing. You know. Okay. I think we're good there for now. All right, so that was that conversation. Now, I think the last thing today, or next to last thing, we have to talk about Hulk Hogan at the very end of the show. There was, I mentioned at the top, it was like an ethering of a fan done by J.J. Watt over on Twitter this week. So you guys know how I feel about training camp stats. Like I've said for over a year on this show that I hate training camp stats. I think they're useless. I think that they're just a way to try to drum up some kind of conversation. So I guess I can understand why some writers feel the need to do it. I get why Elliott Shore-Parks does it. The people who are super diehard football fans that for whatever reason want to know how many passes Jalen Hurts attempted and completed and how many drops Devontae Smith had in a given day, those people are thrilled, I'm sure, to have these numbers. And then like the rest of us who live in a pretty normal mindset say this is all stupid and who cares, it's practice. Like coaches can track those stats for whatever reason, but like why do we need to know them? Why do we need to see it? I honestly have always hated the play-by-play where it's like, Jalen Hurts attempts a 15-yard pass across the middle, but A.J. Brown, it hits his left hand and drops to the ground. Why? Why do I need that? Who's that for? Who is that content for? Are we really that deprived of football at this point that we need to know the play-by-play at training camp? So I've hated that kind of stuff for a long time. But I'm just some guy. I'm just some schmuck who talks into a microphone. J.J. Watt had a very successful NFL career. So J.J. Watt goes to Twitter, and he puts out the following. I'm going to hide the comments here for a second. I'll bring them back in a little bit. But J.J. Watt, let me zoom this in for everybody watching over on YouTube, Facebook, and X. J.J. Watt says, training camp stats are insane and ridiculous. Used to think it was always just people joking, but now seeing them seriously reported. You have no idea what the purpose of that period is, what the goals are, what the context is, etc. It could be a strictly third and long blitz period where every play is skewed to the defense's advantage. Coaches could be asking the quarterback to focus specifically on one route concept. D-line may be focusing only on bull rushes one day or just speed rushes for one period. More importantly, practice is for practicing. You're supposed to fail. You're supposed to try new things, see what works and what doesn't work, etc. If you only do what works, you'll never grow, adapt, change. The entire point of training camp is to build and grow towards the season so you perform your best when the real games start. Fair and balanced take by J.J. Watt. But that fan, this guy Dan, says, agree with most of your take, but you're supposed to fail. That's a terrible mindset. Guess that's why you never won a Super Bowl. J.J. Watt responds, guess that's why you have a cartoon picture of yourself as a major league ball player instead of a real one. Beep, 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 beep. I mean, this guy Dan, at _D_Reed. You got to take the L. J.J. Watt got you. Got you bad. I mean, holy shit. That's pretty brutal. That is a pretty brutal demolition of Dan. Now, I'm pretty sure, I'm going to look here really quick. Did Dan change his profile picture on it since yesterday? I think he did. So that's interesting. Very, very interesting. Anyway, J.J. Watt, I think, is right. And here's the thing that you kind of have to keep in mind when it comes to training camp and practice in general, right? I'm just a guy who's designed some practices for soccer teams. You don't hold me as like the bastion of knowledge here. Don't like try to hold me in some kind of high regard as a tactical genius. But like something as simple as, in soccer, something as simple as like you can only pass with your weak foot, typically your left foot. You're going to have a harder time. If you set conditions, you can't score unless you complete 3 passes first, play out of the back. You can only score on a header. If you don't know that as the media and you're watching the team play, well, then guess what? It's not going to look great all the time. So what J.J. Watt said was football specific. I mean, imagine if you're watching a basketball practice and they say, no mid-range jumpers. You can only attempt threes or slash. That's it. You can only attempt shots off the glass. Okay. Hockey. The only shots that are going to count are in the crease. That's it. No bombing from inside the blue line. Practice is going to look different. If you don't know what the conditions are and you aren't perceptive enough to kind of pick up on, oh, that must be what they're doing, and you're just reporting the stats based on what you see, J.J. Watt's right. You're missing some very important context. So this again is why I say I think the whole idea of stats at training camp are really dumb, but I get why beat writers put them out. It's engagement. And by the way, like the idea of engagement also needs to be kind of like looked at, because a lot of times people go, oh, you're just looking to get your clicks. Elliot Shore-Parks is just looking to get his clicks. I don't know how much money Elliot Shore-Parks makes on X. I can't imagine it's like Boku bucks. Can't imagine that it's life-changing money for him. So I really don't think that's what it is. It's more about just having your name out, because ultimately those are the kind of things that are going to help. Like if it helps your overall livelihood, the clicks on X might not matter, but the engagement and building that following, well, those things can certainly matter, because maybe that does lead to more people listening to your segments on shows, more people listening to your podcast. That ultimately leads to a more engaged listenership, which then helps with getting better sponsorships, which ultimately leads to more money for your podcast or for the network or for the radio station. So like there are reasons that I guess you would engage in that kind of content, but I could not care less about it. I don't know what this is. Tony Louis says, you're pretty good at making sound effects with your mouth. You should have been that guy from Police Academy. What is happening? What's happening? Let's see. Poonugs says, I don't think he meant you're meant to fail in practice. He meant you're going to fail in practice, because if you aren't failing, you aren't learning. That's correct. I think that's the proper read on it. All right, so we've now gotten to the Dome. We talked about the update on Hart and the potential appeal process with the NHL. Jeffrey Lurie's rationale for why he might want a Dome. We didn't dive too much into the Phillies at all today. I think it's just kind of simple. Like, I stand resolute in the same belief that I've had for a while. And watching the Phillies struggle in the final game of the series against the Red Sox, to me, just kind of like rammed home the point. And I think it's a really simple point. And I brought this up on Monday when we played John Middleton's comments. At this point, the Phillies have to go all in. I don't want to hear about 5 to 10 years from now. Watching the Phillies go out and win 2 out of 3 against the Red Sox was great, but they should have won the series finale. Luzardo implodes in the 5th inning. He goes into the 5th with a no-hitter, and then he just kind of implodes. And still don't know if it's because he's tipping his pitches. We saw Alex Cora kind of like doing the signaling before the grand slam, and so you kind of think that maybe there's something. There was a GIF going around of somebody showing the arm slot on a breaking pitch versus a fastball. Like, somebody has figured out something about Luzardo. It clearly has gotten around. It's a bummer to see that, like, he hasn't been able to fix whatever the issue is. But the bigger concern that I had was, there you are in a game that you should be able to win. You go to extra innings. Bullpen gives up a 2-run home run. You're kind of pissed off. You're pretty upset about it. You, at one point in extra innings, have to pull Schwarber for Weston Wilson to be a pinch runner. He gets thrown out. Not a great look. And then ultimately, like, Max Kepler comes up to the plate. And there's not a single soul who thought that Max Kepler was going to deliver. And remember, Kepler was the guy who was supposed to provide some kind of something to this lineup that you didn't have. And I said at the time it was a bad signing, and it's proven to be a really, really bad signing, and he's been somewhat of a malcontent, and they don't seem committed to having him be an everyday player, and based on his production, I don't blame them. But, like, you need another bat. There are names now that are getting kind of tossed about. I saw Kwan's name get thrown out there. I saw, what's his name? Adolis Garcia's name has been floated out there. There are a few others that I was like, oh, okay, it's interesting. But they need another bat. And this is the time to push in the chips. Because Schwarber's not signed long-term. He's a free agent at the end of the year. He could leave. Real Muto, coming to the end of his productivity. His game has already changed somewhat. He's still great behind the plate, but the bat's not giving you the kind of power, the kind of extra base power that you want it to. Castellanos is Castellanos. Harper's looked otherworldly, but there is a possibility that he kind of regresses to the mean again, especially if he tweaks that wrist. I still think it's time for them to push in the chips. If Andrew Painter's the only untouchable, whatever. But, man, you better be, I keep saying this, but, like, you better be sure that Andrew Painter is going to be an ace with the way that they've kept him off limits for players that could help the team. They still need another bullpen arm. I could maybe be talked into the idea that some combination of Luzardo and Suarez going to the pen in the postseason maybe works, but I still wouldn't love it. They need another bat. 6 days out from the trade deadline. If they don't make an impact acquisition, I might light my hair on fire on the stream. I will probably scream a lot that day. I'm just double checking here really quick. I need to make sure of the date here. 31st is on a Thursday. So we did an emergency bonus episode about the Carter Hart acquittal yesterday. Maybe we'll have to do an MLB trade deadline day show. Because if the Phillies get to the trade deadline and the clock strikes the hour and they don't make a move, or they make another bargain barrel move, I'm going to lose my shit. O'Neal Cruz, please. If you go listen to Phightin Words, they talked about O'Neal Cruz on today's show, but it's going to cost a lot. The name being floated out there is interesting, but it is going to cost you a ton. I don't know what this is. Andrew Fawcett says, Russ trying to look like Superman. No. I'm not trying to look like Superman. I am Superman. No. Let's see. Greg Bondarenko going up to the Phillies versus Yankees. Wait a second. I'm an idiot. See, this is why I do this show. Because I don't know if I can make that work. I should look. I'm supposed to be in New York this weekend with the family. Now I'm thinking, do I try to get our family to a Phillies-Yankees game this weekend? I feel like it's a terrible idea. But now I'm kind of invested in the idea, if nothing else. I don't know how the hell we'd make it work. We probably wouldn't. We'd be late to the game. But now I'm like kind of committed to the notion of it. All right, I'm going to look into it. St. Nancy checks in. Slow cooked pork, chipotle lime slaw, jalapeno poppers, chili lime, roasted sweet potatoes. What is missing? Margaritas, or Mai Tais, or mojitos. That's what's missing. There's a reason she's a saint. That's it. All right. I think we're going to probably roll out. But before we do, a final word. Hulk Hogan died. People are sad. Some people are happy. I don't know when we ever got into this place in the world where we actively rejoice when somebody dies, unless like they're a war criminal. Now, Hulk Hogan has a very, very spotty track record, to say the least. And I'm a white guy, so like it doesn't apply to me. The outrage, I can't really feel the same kind of outrage to somebody who does feel maligned or let down by Hulk Hogan from a recording that was done without his knowledge years and years ago. It's a bad recording. And it also kind of would make you think that it's not the first time he dropped the word that he did and the sentiment behind it that he did. And so I'm not making an excuse for him. Do I feel like it probably would have been a little bit sensible to maybe wait a day before you dance on the guy's grave? Maybe. Do I think that it's totally fair that people on the day of his death said, hey, all-time great in pro wrestling, also kind of a shitty human being for some of the stuff that he said? I think it's probably fair. I think there's like a middle ground that you can kind of find. Now, I will just speak on this from the perspective of somebody who likes pro wrestling and has grown up a pro wrestling fan and is, once again, a pretty avid pro wrestling fan. You can't talk about the history of professional wrestling without Hulk Hogan. Now, we could have a conversation about whether or not he was ultimately the best thing for business towards the end of his run in WCW. We could certainly have a conversation about his return to WWE after WCW went under. We can have a talk about whether or not he really hurt TNA/Impact when he went there on Spike TV. They went from the 6-sided ring to a 4-sided ring. We could have that conversation. We could talk about whether the real American Freestyle Wrestling League that he and Eric Bischoff started. We could have a conversation about whether or not that was a good idea. About the Real American Lager. His last appearance with WWE was out in California. He came out with Jimmy Hart, and the crowd in California booed him mercilessly. And then, in the aftermath of it, he did an interview where somebody said, hey, what did you think about people booing you? And he goes, oh, no, brother. They were booing Jimmy, Mouth of the South Hart, brother. They weren't booing Hulk Hogan, brother. They were booing Jimmy. Yeah, brother. No, they were booing you. But here's the thing. I don't know if I can blame you. If you are somebody who heard those comments and felt personally offended and wounded by those words, you have the right to boo. And you probably should have booed. I look at it simply from a very flawed human being, but who did give me, as a pro wrestling fan, some of my favorite memories, including Bash at the Beach, where he comes out and it looks like he's going to save Macho Man and the WCW team. And everybody's waiting for the third man. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash are in the ring. And then they scurry away like rats. And Hogan gets in the ring. And as he's walking down, Bobby the Brain Heenan says, yeah, but whose side is he on? And Tony Schiavone goes, what are you talking about? And he goes, whose side is he on? Hall and Nash are out of the ring. Hogan walks over to the far side of the ring. He looks at them. He turns around. He's talking to the ref. He leans his back against the ropes, and he drops the leg on Macho Man. The best heel turn in the history of pro wrestling. Something that can never be recreated. You can try to make the case that the John Cena turn at Elimination Chamber with The Rock doing the throat slit was better. The follow-up to that has been Garbaggio, which does affect its overall impact. The NWO was like the thing that took over wrestling, part of 83 weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, while we do not condone everything Hulk Hogan has done in his life, we do appreciate the memories that he made for pro wrestling fans. Now, I was not around for the 80s. I saw in the very beginning somebody was saying about Macho Man and Hogan, what that meant to be in the 80s, what wrestling was like in the 80s. I wasn't around for it. But as a kid who grew up during the Monday Night Wars, there will always be part of me that can appreciate the character on screen, not the man behind the character, and says the character on screen is unforgettable. And so, that's that on Hulk Hogan today. Let's see. Last thing. Joe Fisher says, that is when I knew Hulk turned. I noticed most of the time Bobby the Brain said happened back then. Man, Joe, that was almost like your face just hit the keyboard a few times. There's some missing syntax there. But I think I get it. That once Bobby the Brain Heenan said it, you were like, oh yeah. Because Bobby the Brain Heenan used to always make it sound like Hogan was an awful guy. And so then finally, Heenan was sort of like vindicated. Tony Louis says they booed him because he was in the liberal capital of the world. He got cheered out of the building a few years ago in Toronto. Saying that word once doesn't mean you're an ass the rest of your life. The way that he said it, though, there's like no chance that was the first time in his life that he said it. That, I think, is what people take more exception to, even than just the recording itself. But, whatever. Ford says, the little coif in your hair, is that intentional, Russ? Where's the coif? This? This is just my hair, Ford. It's just the lettuce. It's just the lettuce. It's getting long again. I think it's time for a haircut, but not too short. Not too short. Jimmy Rollo says, I don't see today's Phightin Words anywhere. Just me? No, it's up. The show is up. I'm looking at there we go. Look to the podcast feed right now. It's up. And it's also over on YouTube. It is there. Andrew Fawcett also shouts out Ozzy Osbourne passing away. Also sad. A lot of legends. Theo Huxtable passing away. That was sad. Accidental drowning with his family on vacation in Costa Rica. That's horrible. Horrible stuff. Allison says, sad for childhood regarding Hulk Hogan. Ozzy devastated me, though. There's a picture. Like, if Ozzy passing makes you sad, I guess just try to avoid. There's a picture of Sharon Osbourne sitting off stage right, watching Ozzy in his final concert. And she's just kind of like sitting there with her arms around her legs. And she like looks equal parts like proud and sad. Like she kind of knew that he was going downhill pretty fast, it seems like. And it's still sad. Andrew Fawcett says about Hogan, I guess, I met him a couple of times and he was great to people who approached him. Amadeo says Hulk Hogan, the character, iconic. Terry Bollea, yikes. I don't know why there are people like talking about AOL. I don't know what the hell happened. This place is just going nuts. Eric Bretschneider, who was here yesterday, I think for the first time, says he was booed because of his political affiliation. Could be. Lawrence Fine says Chuck Mangione died too. I saw that. And then, I don't know how we got on Ralph Macchio. I don't know where all that came from, but I see people talking about Ralph Macchio is not dead. But I do see people talking about him. It will be sad, I guess, when that happens. But that's hopefully for him a very long way away. All right, listen. Today's show, we're wrapping up before the hour mark, which technically makes it a shorter show. I thought it was going to be a half hour, and it said it was about an hour. But thanks for being here. This is 4 episodes this week. Monday, Wednesday, emergency episode Thursday, and this episode. Do me a favor if you haven't done so already. Like the video, share the video, subscribe. When you like the video, it sends a good signal to YouTube. And then people who don't watch the show get it served to them in the For You tab, or it pops up in their related videos, or like you should watch this next. If you share the video, I think it sends another good signal. If you subscribe to the channel, that's just great, and you can hit the bell, ring the bell to get notified whenever the show goes live. If you find the short form content on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, hit that with a like as well. It makes video guy Amadeo, warm and fuzzy in his tum-tum. So I'll be back on Monday unless some kind of crazy news breaks in the world of Philadelphia sports, national sports, or the media that cover them. Until Monday, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy. But you knew that already because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. Talk to each and every one of you Monday here on the Russ Joy Show. Bye now.